Welcome to the Lumenverse. Before we begin, are you listening to this while it's raining, or is it sunny where you are? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoy our stories, please remember to like and subscribe. Now, let's begin. The traveler hesitated. He knew he shouldn't. But he was tired and curiosity got the best of him. He leaned toward room number 6 and peeked through the keyhole. The room was dark, but even in the dim light, the traveler could see something lying on the bed. It was too small to be a person, but too big to be a pet. And it was moving. The clerk's whispered warning echoed in his ears. He had seen her shifting, pale skin, had heard her soft, labored breathing. But her eye? He suddenly had the feeling that he was being watched. Even in the bustling street, the hair on his neck stood on end. Slowly, almost unconsciously, he glanced over his shoulder. There was nothing. Just a few faces hurrying past, wrapped closely in coats. The traveler let out a sigh, shaking his head. It was ridiculous. But still, for the rest of the day, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was following him. As the sun set, he found himself walking back toward the hotel once again. Sometimes, the road is the loneliest place in the world. Endless, dark, and empty. The only company is from your headlights, cutting through the night. It's easy to feel like you're the only person left in the world, but sometimes, it feels like a pair of eyes is watching from the trees. And that's exactly what happened to one woman. Driving home alone on a deserted highway, the old woman's words haunted him. He never told anyone about that night, but sometimes, he still drives the highway. And he sees a figure in the distance. Long black hair and a pale, beautiful face. It's always the same. He sees her standing by the side of the road. He tries to get closer, but every time she disappears into the trees. He should stop by now, drive another route, or even find another destination. But every time, something urges him on. He finds himself driving even faster, faster than he should, on a lonely highway, but he has to see her face. He has to. People are drawn to the woods, to the vast expanses of untamed trees and silence. But forests are the perfect hiding place. Things that should not exist in our world find space there. There are stories of spirits in the trees, creatures that only come out in the dark, and voices in the shadows. Some are harmless, but not all. The group spun around, heart pounding. The night was pitch black, and the trees blocked their flashlights. But there was something moving through the trees. Something big. They called out to it, hoping their voices would scare whatever it was away. But there was no answer, just the sound of something moving through the brush. Closer and closer. The police investigate. They try to warn people, but no one ever listens. They think the warnings are just to scare children or drunk campers. But they should listen, because one night, you might be in the woods alone, in the dark, and you might hear the whistle. The house looked ordinary enough. Quiet neighborhood, friendly neighbors, children playing in the street. But inside, things were different. Every night at 3:03, something began to knock on the walls. Softly at first, then louder, harder, pounding again and again, as though trying to escape. A plumber checked the pipes. An exterminator searched for rodents, but neither found a cause. The knocking continued. Every night. Always 3 knocks, never more. Plumbers checked the pipes, found no leaks. Electricians searched for faulty circuits. An inspector scoured the basement, but the smell remained. The family tried to ignore it. But then the whispers came. Soft, indistinct words in the corner of a room. A constant soft whisper that filled their ears. The noises intensified. Every night, the knocking on the walls. The footsteps in the attic. The whispers in the hall. She went to comfort it. It was just a child. But when she reached down, her hand passed through the figure, her fingers sinking into nothing. She gasped and snatched her hand back, and in an instant, it was gone. She shook her husband awake. He didn't believe her. He thought it was a hallucination. But she knew what she had seen. And there was something else. The family left with the last of their things. They wanted to forget the strange place, the strange noises, the strange figure crouched on the stairs, but the whispers followed them. For weeks, a faint voice whispered in their ears, so faint they nearly missed it, and every so often a child would appear at the edge of their vision. A glimpse of matted hair and pale, empty eyes. The doll stood in the corner, facing him. Its painted smile seemed to shine in the darkness. He could have tried to throw it out. He could have tried to smash it to pieces. Anything. But some strange force, stopped him. Instead, he placed the doll gently back on the shelf, closed the book he had been reading, and tried to sleep. For the rest of the night, all he could hear, faintly like a child's whisper, was giggling. The police tried to burn the doll. It wouldn't even char. No one wanted to keep it. It got passed between antique shops to collectors and eventually a museum. But the giggling never stopped. Late at night, the guards hear something. A whispered voice, a child laughing, the sound of tiny feet on the floor. The museum closes the exhibit when they realize their security cameras only capture static when it's there, a broken mirror, a photograph. Objects carry memories. They stay in our homes, on our walls, around our necks. And sometimes, a memory doesn't stay in the past. Sometimes, something more comes back. A whisper, a knock on the wall, a cold hand reaching out of the dark. Shadows moved in the water. Dark figures gliding just beneath the surface, reaching toward them, grasping the water like hands. Jason swore something wrapped around his leg and pulled him underwater. He kicked free with all his strength and raced for the shore. Whispered tales of the lake spread like wildfire through the town. Teens stopped going out alone at night. The police tried to shut down the rumors, but they couldn't erase the stories. So the stories continued to grow. Rumors of the girl standing at the lake shore on quiet nights. People stopped going near the lake altogether. The stories grew darker, more terrifying with each whisper. They said something lurks underwater, waiting, watching, until the dead hour of the night, when the lake is still and the stars hold their breath. They whispered that the girl beckons in unwary travelers, drawing them closer and closer, until the moment they step onto the shore and she lunges. Some said she dragged her victims underwater, and the lake swallowed them whole. The parents thought their son was dreaming, until they went into his room and heard it. A voice, whispering through the vent, so faint and soft that they could barely make out the words. But one came through, loud and clear. It was calling the boy's name. No one walked through the halls. No family ever took a nap in the living room. And on a quiet night, if you listen closely, you can still hear the scratching, the whispers, calling from inside the walls, desperate, pleading, and if you listen long enough, the whispers grow louder, until you can make out words. Let me out. Let me out. No one walked through the halls. No family ever took a nap in the living room. And on a quiet night, if you listen closely, you can hear the scratching, the whispers, pleading, desperate. The Johnson family tried to move to sell the house, but no one bought it. Every potential buyer was driven out by the whispers, the scratching, the voices. Eventually they had no choice. They packed their things and left the house behind. And as the Johnsons drove away down the long winding driveway, they thought they heard a faint voice, carried on the wind, growing fainter and fainter, until it faded away. And they never looked back. The highway is a place of solitude, darkness, desolation. It's a lonely place to drive, especially in the dead of night when the stars are fading. Few cars go through. You'll drive for hours without another headlight in sight. The air is still, the radio dead. No one knows the name of the station or the man working there. No sign marks the station, and no buildings lie nearby. At dawn, it vanishes, taking the strange attendant and the endless highway with it. Most say the station only appears in the hours before dawn, but some still report seeing lights in the distance, far after sunrise. Some speculate it was a hallucination, a product of sleep exhaustion and a trick of the eyes. But travelers have reported the same thing, over and over. A gas station in the distance, a silent attendant, watching their every move. Far beneath the earth, in a long deserted mine, there is a stairway carved into solid stone. It descends into darkness, and no light can illuminate it. Many miners have ventured down the stairs hoping to find riches or hidden treasure, but few who entered ever came out. For some, their flashlights suddenly died, casting them into an endless void of darkness. For others, strange screams filled the air like whispers, or shadows danced just behind them. The urban explorer was never found, and the stairwell remains, waiting. And every now and then, on quiet nights, when the wind is still and the world is sleeping, you can almost hear the faint, soft sound of footsteps slowly descending down into the black. And that whisper again, carried on the breeze. Keep going down. They say some secrets should stay buried. They say some things should never be discovered. And when one urban explorer brought a camera down into the darkness, what he found at the bottom was a truth that's far, far worse than any ghost or monster. But that's for another night. That's for another story. For now, it's late. The hour is dark. Get some rest. Tomorrow is full of new mysteries to uncover. The night is a place of secrets. It conceals things and keeps secrets, and holds the answers to questions you never even knew existed. So next time you look out into the night and see nothing but darkness, just remember, you're never as alone as you think. And if you're afraid, well, just remember I'll be here waiting, here or in the shadows, in the trees, in the whispers of the wind. One more story couldn't hurt. Go ahead, make it a good one. It wouldn't be scary otherwise now, would it? All right then, I suppose I have a few stories in the bank. Ready for another trip to the edge of the world? She tried to convince herself it was a prank, a cruel game someone was playing with her. But as the weeks passed, the calls became more frequent, her own voice, weeping, begging for help. She couldn't sleep anymore. Every night the phone rang. Every night she heard her own voice filled with fear, and every night she found herself on the edge of tears. Why was this happening? Why her? One week, she couldn't take it any longer. She answered the next call. She whirled around, the phone slipping from her hand. A dark shape stood at the other end of the room. It looked like a woman, tall, thin, with long hair and pale skin, like her. It raised a finger to its lips, a silent command for silence. She felt cold sweat run down her back. Then the shape moved. Its feet made no sound on the floor. Slowly, carefully, it walked toward her. She couldn't move, couldn't speak. Terror gripped her throat in a vise. With each step, the shape grew closer. The room was quiet. The shape was right in front of her now. She could see the faintest hint of a face in the shadows, a cold that gleamed, and in a soft, breathy whisper, it spoke, with her voice. Found you. The woman told herself it was her imagination, a trick of light, but the longer she saw the shadow, the more real it seemed. It grew taller, thinner, its limbs lengthening. Its smile looked more twisted with each passing night. She began seeing the shadow in the daytime. In her reflection, in her peripheral vision, it seemed to be getting closer, watching her. The room was empty, dark, cold, and quiet. She turned, tried the door. She pounded on it, tried to push it open, to force it, to break it, to do something, anything, but the door stayed shut. And in the dark, she heard a soft, breathy laugh from somewhere behind her. She turned, breath catching in her throat. Something was watching her, a shape at the end of the room. She could make out 2 points of light staring at her from the shadows, and as they moved closer, those points of light became glowing eyes. The sound of footsteps, the rustling of grass, just barely audible. A low, raspy voice carried on the wind. The boy stopped talking abruptly. A moment later, you hear him whimper and scramble to his feet, the sound of rustling as he tries to run. And then his voice, screaming, terrified. Something moved through the grass. It moved too fast, too soundlessly. The boy was panting. He stumbled. He fell. And you hear the grass shifting as something approached. The field is still there, just a few steps from the road. No one ever planted there, never will. Sometimes, when the wind is blowing, you can still hear the voice, whispering, as the grass rustles under your feet. Sometimes you think you hear a faint echo. Someone screaming. You could walk away from the field, leave the whispers behind. But the things that dwell there, they won't leave you. A whisper in your ear, the feeling of being watched, a darkness in your dreams, a shadow that lingers at the edge of your vision. He tried to calm himself. It was his imagination, a trick of the light. A dark cloud passing over the moon. He took a deep breath, turned back toward the steering wheel, and the figure was staring at him from the passenger seat. He jerked back, heart pounding. The figure was closer this time. He could make out the shape of a face in the darkness, and one thing that wasn't just in his imagination, the eyes, pale, staring right at him. He started the car, trying to focus on the road. His breathing was fast, erratic. Every muscle was tight, every sense hyper-aware. He checked the mirror. The figure was still there, sitting perfectly still, hands on their lap. The stories end here for tonight. But in the quiet places of the world, far from the safety of bright streetlights and the walls of your home, they're just beginning. Sweet dreams. In the deep night, when you lay awake in the dark, think of the field of tall grass whispering in the wind. Imagine the shadow at the end of your bed, watching you. Dream of the figure in the back seat with its cold eyes. Think of those pale hands on the window glass. And the next time you're driving alone, past the hour of midnight, listen closely. You never know what might be hiding in the dark. They tried to shout, bang on the walls. Not a single sound echoed. The room was eerily quiet. The silence seemed to press in on them until they were gasping for breath. They tried to break down the front door. It wouldn't budge. They were trapped inside. And in the dark, they heard something. Soft, so soft they thought it was their imaginations. Whispers. Every night, curious tourists sneak into the house. It stands alone, silent under the stars. Sometimes people whisper they hear faint sounds behind the walls. Footsteps, scratching, breathing. No one dares live in those apartments anymore. The complex stays empty, except for one man who lives on the top floor. He's the last one left in the entire building, and as he sits in his apartment at night, listening to the distant drip, 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 he swears he hears something, soft, faint, whispered from the sink. We're still here. Sometimes the familiar becomes unfamiliar. A sound when you're home alone, a shadow you think you glimpse in passing. Maybe the road leading out of a quiet little town, lit by a single street lamp. Perhaps the footsteps of someone coming down the stairs, except you're the only one home. Maybe the hand you see reaching out from beneath your bed. Or the soft whispers from the darkness under your closet. The driver never picked up another hitchhiker again. He never found an explanation, but he knew what he'd seen. Even now, if he drives that stretch of highway, with no one for miles around, some nights he still sees her, standing on the side of the road, thumb sticking out. Stay in your beds, children. Let the night take hold. Let the darkness fold over you. Close your eyes and tell yourself these tales are nothing more than old folk tales and half-remembered dreams. Ignore the sound of whispers at your window. Ignore the footsteps outside your bedroom. Ignore the feeling that something is still watching you. As you try to sleep, some swore they even heard singing, and soft murmurs that sounded like conversation. People said the artist was talking to her model, though no one ever found a picture of the man, only half-finished sketches. A collector bought the portrait. He put it right at the center of his art collection. The painter seemed so real, as if her brush was about to slip off the canvas at any moment. At first, he could swear the eyes followed him, watching his every move. One night, when he woke in the dead of night, he walked to the living room, wanting to confirm if it was true. And when he looked across the room, the artist stared back, and then they heard a tapping on the wall. Slowly, methodically, as if a child's fingertips ran lightly over the plaster. They whispered, asking who was there, then heard a high, muffled giggle. One of the teens left the room to make a phone call. As he reached for the door to the exit, something grabbed his arm. He froze, turning. A child stared back, standing inches away, a wide smile on his face, and dropped his flashlight, and they fled into the dark, running until they reached the road. When they turned back, the school loomed behind them, silent. No one's gone inside since. But at night, when you drive by, you can see small figures in the windows waving at passing cars. And on quiet nights, you can hear a voice calling from the abandoned school. A few years later, someone moved into the farmhouse next door to the school. They said at night, they could hear little voices whispering through the walls, and every so often, they woke to see small shadows outside their window. In the morning, they were gone. One night, they went outside to turn off a light and felt something cold reach out, grab their hand. When they looked down, no one was there. So many stories of ghost children, and this isn't even the last one. Not by a long shot. Every time room 6 is filled, every patient finds their own story. And they always seem to share some details when you ask. A faceless figure standing at the end of their bed, and the faint sound of whispered voices, like little children, just outside the door. Nurses walk by. They swear they feel someone tugging on the back of their coat, like a child playing hide and seek. Sometimes, the whispers grow so loud the nurses can almost make out what the voices say. They try not to strain their ears too often. Some things are better left a mystery. The hospital is quiet at night, footsteps at the edge of a forest, or whispering under the bed. Voices in the dark, asking to be let in. A knock at the window when you are alone. Whispers in the night, carried on the wind. So if you ever lay awake and sense something there in the shadows, maybe it's just your imagination. But that doesn't mean you're alone. And if you ever feel their whisper brush against your ear, hear steps that aren't your own, just close your eyes and wait for daybreak. Sometimes the stories are more than memories. Sometimes they linger in the things we pass down, in the places we leave behind, and sometimes they follow us. So you might not be alone, but maybe that's not a bad thing, because even in the darkest hours, with whispers on the wind, when you listen closely, Those stories might be keeping watch over you. A knock echoed through the room. Then another. Her heart pounding, the girl crept to the door. There's a story about a house. An old, gray house on the corner of Ash Lane. People say it's abandoned for decades, but sometimes at night, the lights flicker on inside. A man named David moved into town and rented the place. He didn't believe in the rumors. To him, it was just cheap rent, nothing more. David's heart quickened as the sound drew closer. He listened intently, hearing the familiar dragging steps creeping up the hallway. His eyes fixed on the gap beneath the door, watching as shadows danced across the floor. And then, the sound stopped. David's heart was in his throat, as could see the shadowy figure, tall and thin, its limbs twisted at odd angles. Its smile was wide and unnerving, sending chills down David's spine. It just stood there in the dark, watching him silently, as if waiting for something. When David didn't move, the figure's smile widened even more, its teeth glistening in the faint light. The next morning, the house was empty, and David was gone, leaving behind all his belongings. All the neighbors could say was that he wasn't alone when he left. Mara was taken aback by the sight of the doll on her desk, its wet hair dripping onto the wood. She hadn't placed it there, and the sound of dripping water had woken her. Now, standing in her room with the doll staring up at her, she felt a shiver run down her spine. With each passing week, the town began to forget. The missing persons flyers faded and yellowed in the sun. The police stopped searching. Yet, every night, the clock chimed at midnight. It became an unspoken thing. Everyone knew it, but few people spoke about it. Some even said you could hear a child's voice coming from upstairs, or a faint shuffling of footsteps in the attic. But that was just stories, right? Mara's fear grew with each passing night as the doll continued to appear in her room, its wide-open eyes staring at her. She locked it outside, threw it away, and even tried to destroy it. But it always found its way back. On the night she disappeared, her bedroom door was found locked from the inside, with the doll lying on the bed, its once broken eyes now intact and staring wide open. The clearing was empty at first, but when his eyes adjusted to the dark, he saw something that made his heart sink. There, standing alone in the middle, was a single chair, illuminated by a pool of moonlight. The voice whispered again, right by his ear. "Sit." Lewis felt an inexplicable urge to sit. He moved towards the chair, the soft ground and wet leaves muffling his footsteps. As he settled into the chair, the voice spoke again. "Look up." He blinked. No, it was just his tired eyes playing tricks on him. He'd driven those roads thousands of times. There was definitely no new road, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He followed the new road, trying to convince himself it was just a different exit. The road curved in ways he didn't recognize, and a thick fog covered everything. Daniel stood in the sudden darkness, heart pounding. He reached for his phone, but the screen lit up for just a second, then died. The emergency lights flickered on, casting everything in a dim red glow. Where was the figure now? He crept forward, heart hammering. His eyes scanned the deserted aisles, rows of books casting long shadows. Then, he heard footsteps, somewhere nearby. Lewis stood frozen, his mind racing. That wasn't possible. He had locked his door, and there was no other way in. He quickly checked his windows, but they were all intact and tightly closed too. His heart pounding, he followed the trail of mud back to his bedroom door. There, he found something that sent a chill down his spine. Daniel slammed on the brakes. The car slid to a stop, spraying gravel across the road. He squinted out the windshield. It was still foggy, but he could make out the shape of a person facing him. She shivered, a chill running down her spine. It was impossible. The house was abandoned. No one lived here. But the thought of dozens of children sneaking in here at night to leave their mark, it felt like something out of a nightmare. For days, neighbors searched the surrounding area, but there was no trace of Lewis. It was as if he vanished into thin air. At night, people swore they could hear a sound in the forest, soft like footsteps, and sometimes, in the trees, they caught glimpses of something pale, moving slowly through the fog like a phantom. The figure didn't move. Daniel sat frozen, his mind racing. Who was it? What were they doing out here? Slowly he rolled down his window. "Hello?" he called. The figure just stood there, silent. He reached the top of the stairs. The attic was dark, the moonlight casting strange shadows across the dusty floor. The footsteps were louder now, closer. And then, he saw it, the clock standing in the corner. Its ancient face was dark, its hands still. but he could see the pendulum swinging back and forth in a steady rhythm, as if someone had recently wounded. Daniel's heart pounded. Why wasn't the figure answering? He called again. Still no response. Just that steady gaze, unwavering. Nervously, Daniel took his foot off the brake and eased the car forward. As the headlights drew closer, more details emerged. The figure was a woman, dressed in old clothes, her hair long and tangled. She didn't move even as the car crept toward her. She tried to convince herself it was nothing. She was tired. She was just imagining things. But the footfalls kept up, constant, steady. She took a detour, turned down a different street. But the sound followed. Closer now, almost at her heels. Days later, the police searched the woods, but found no sign of the mysterious woman, the road, or the sign. The only evidence of whatever had happened that night was Daniel's abandoned car, and the word written in the dirt. The story spread through the town like wildfire. Some people moved away, too frightened to drive that road again. The ones that stayed behind whispered about the woman and that strange word. Sometimes you hear whispers, hushed conversations that aren't for your ears, footsteps on empty floors when all the doors are closed, soft laughter fading as soon as it came. And then there are the books. Some of them move by themselves, sliding across the shelves. Others, they open on their own. As the story spread, more and more people began to avoid driving down that road. The few who did reported strange noises, like whispers on the wind, coming from the dark woods. But the police dismissed the stories as nothing more than superstition. After all, there was no sign of the road that had appeared and then disappeared, leaving nothing but the word, stay. The years passed, and the incident became a cautionary tale, a warning to stay away from that stretch of woods. Daniel tried to follow the sound, but every time he turned a corner the footsteps stopped. It was toying with him, he thought. Playing games. And the whispers. They were faint but constant, moving around him, all around him, like a voice without a body. Daniel. Daniel. Footsteps, tapping against the sidewalk, soft, but there. Always a few paces behind. She didn't dare close her eyes. She could picture it, a shadow always moving just out of sight, watching. Waiting. Sometimes she thought she heard breathing too. Long, slow breaths that matched her own. A small town, not worth mentioning on most maps. One main street, one traffic light, a handful of houses, a diner, a supermarket. It was like any other sleepy little town. But there was something about it. A feeling in the air. Like something wasn't quite right. But every time she turned, nothing was there. The breathing stopped. The footsteps went silent. She thought about calling the police. But would they believe her? How could she prove she was being stalked when there was nothing to show for it? Days passed. The footsteps followed her everywhere. To work, to her friend's house, even to the grocery store. She could hear them even in broad daylight, in busy, crowded streets, and each time, the sound was a little closer. She told herself it was just a prank, some local kids playing a prank. Nothing sinister. There was a logical explanation for all of it. She was about to turn away when she heard something. Soft, far away, carried on the wind. Children laughing. His heart hammered in his chest. Was he dreaming? He pinched himself, but he didn't wake. Slowly, like something rising from deep water, a shape appeared in the darkness. It was human, but too thin, almost skeletal. Then, with a creak of wood and a crack of bone, the figure began to crawl out of the clock. Clara shivered, her thin jacket not doing much to keep out the cold. As she passed the house, she noticed something strange. The lights that had seemed to flicker were now shining steadily, like actual candles, not electric bulbs. Clara tried to ignore the sound, so faint, so far away, she was sure it was just her imagination. Yet it kept going. Soft, high-pitched, dozens of children laughing at once. It echoed like a chorus, like a memory carried on the wind. Clara knew this sound. She'd heard it before, late at night in empty houses, faint and distant, and always, just out of sight. He froze, listening. It was so soft, he wondered if he'd imagined it. Then he heard it again, closer this time, like someone whispering his name, over and over. Slowly, painfully, it pulled itself out. Its limbs were too long, like broken sticks wrapped in skin. As it turned its head, Matthew caught a glimpse of its face. It was like a child's painting, too bright, too exaggerated. Its eyes were too large, its smile too wide. It took a step toward him, the floorboards creaking under its bony feet. With each step, it was closer, closer. Clara froze, her heart pounding. Had she imagined the sound? No, there it was again, a soft, rhythmic tapping, echoing from the windows. like knuckles knocking softly against the glass. He tried to find the exit, but everything looked the same in the dim red light. Every aisle looked the same, every shelf identical. It was a maze, and the footsteps were leading him deeper, away from the exit. The whispers grew louder, closer. It was the same word, over and over. His name. He tried not to look, tried not to give in to the fear, but it was always there, the sound like a pulse at the back of her mind. Her friends noticed she was tired, distracted. Her work suffered, but how could she explain what was happening? They would think she was crazy. She felt like she was going crazy herself. As she walked home one evening, her head down against the rain, the sound was suddenly right behind her, closer than ever before. The fingerprints were tiny, childlike. Clara stood there in the rain, trying to make sense of it. Had some kids broken in? But why go through every window and leave handprints behind? And why the tapping last night, a knock so slow and steady, like a pulse? He got up and crept out of his room. The rest of the house was dark, yet the attic still creaked. Slowly, he climbed the stairs. The sound was clearer now, footsteps, definitely, but something was off. They were too regular, too steady, like clockwork. The police were baffled. There was no sign of a struggle, no clues to be found. It was as if he had simply vanished. Days went by, then weeks. There was still no sign of Matthew. The clock stood where it always had, silent and dark. Every night at midnight, 12 times, then silence. He turned in a circle, heart pounding. No one was there. The library was empty, the lights buzzing softly overhead. But he was sure he'd heard it, his name, whispered from somewhere nearby. Feeling ridiculous, he shook it off. It was probably the security guard trying to scare him. One by one, she examined the prints. Each one was so small, like a child's hand, yet each was different, with unique lines and whorls. It was as if dozens of children had gathered in the dark, pressing their palms to the glass. Clara could almost picture it in her mind. Dozens of tiny hands leaving their marks all across the windows. As he packed up, he shook off the feeling. It was just loneliness, his overactive imagination. He'd been working too hard, staying up too late. Still, he kept glancing at the stacks around him. The shadows seemed deeper now, longer, like the darkness was creeping closer. She spun around, expecting to see someone, but the street was empty. Just the shadows of the buildings and the soft tapping of the rain. She started back home, trying to calm herself. But the steady cadence, closer than ever. Her heart raced. She tried to walk faster, but the steps kept pace, never falling behind, always a beat too close. The library became known as a haunting. People reported whispers, shadows in the stacks, books that seemed to move on their own. Security guards won't work the night shift alone anymore. But the library remains open, its aisles filled with silence, its books waiting for the next unsuspecting student to stay too late. She was running now, her breath coming in gasps. The sound was right behind her, as if someone was running too close enough to touch. The footsteps quickened, as if the thing was gaining on her, its breathing more labored. Closer. She ducked into another alley, desperation driving her, but the footsteps followed, louder now, as if it knew exactly where she was going. In the beginning, the noises were subtle, a knock at the door when no one was there. The occasional creak in the floorboards late at night, nothing to be alarmed about. Most old houses make those sounds. That's what James told himself. He told himself not to worry, that it was normal for a house this old. But the sounds continued. Footsteps in the hall, doors opening and closing, soft whispers in the night. James tried to find logical explanations. The furnace was old, the heating ducts in the walls could make all those sounds. It was the wood settling, the floorboards warping. Nothing to worry about. But when his son came into his room one night, pale and trembling, he couldn't explain it away so easily. "Dad," the boy whispered, "I heard somebody walking around the house." James sat up, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. "It's just the furnace, buddy. It makes all sorts of noises." His son shook his head. It wasn't the furnace. It sounded like... His voice dropped to a whisper. "Footsteps." James smiled. "You were just dreaming, buddy. It was a bad dream." But his son insisted. "I heard footsteps, I swear." James sighed. "Okay. Let's go check. You stay behind me, all right?" Holding a flashlight, they crept down the hall, stopping outside each closed door. "I hear it," his son whispered. Footsteps. James listened. At first, he heard nothing. Then yes, there it was, a soft sound. Footsteps, faint, but there. They went to the stairs, creeping slowly down. The sound grew louder, closer. Whoever was walking, was in the basement. The house was quiet. The furnace hummed softly. James felt silly, checking behind each door. Of course there was nothing there. His son was just scared, that was all. They were almost to the end of the hall when the boy stopped. Wait, he whispered. What? Asked quietly. James stopped at the bottom of the stairs. The basement door was shut, but the sound came from inside. Steady footfalls, like someone pacing back and forth. He pushed the door open, shining the flashlight into the dark. The basement was empty, just old boxes, a bare concrete floor. There was no sound now, no footsteps, no breathing, nothing. You see? James said, trying to keep his voice calm for the boy. Nothing here.